Somebody just tell me whatever you remember. I won't remember how much you guys know.
Well, I mean, all I remember is I know there's like electrical impulses that kind of like migrate between each neuron, and they're all kind of like connected.
Yeah.
And then like each like electrical like neuron like response like kind of travels between neurons and then creates like a response.
Yeah, that's very, very good. So these are neurons in our brain and our spinal cord, and they can be really long as well. So in our nervous system, in our brain, we have the central nervous system that is composed of the brain and the spinal cord. So we have two branches of the nervous system. One is the brain and the spinal cord. Like that's down till here, that's the central nervous system, and the other is called the peripheral nervous system. So that is like everything else, like all the peripheries, like our fingers, our legs, going through our thighs. And some neurons can be really, really long, you know, because they stretch from all over, and they're all interconnected. So what happens is that neuronal signaling is so crucial and so crucial to how we respond, how we react to so many things around us. Now, have you guys ever been in a doctor's office and then sometimes you might notice that they have this small little hammer and then they tap your knee? Have you guys ever felt that before?
Yes.
Yes, and Shan, what do you typically do after that?
Move my leg.
Yes, awesome, great. And then if you don't move it, then there's an issue. So they want to just see that your knee has sensation and that it's like, you know, jerking itself. So what happened is that I wanted to show this to you guys because what this is showing you is what I was talking about last week, which is about these neurons. So typically we represent a neuron, like these are the dendrites of the neuron, the branches. So this is the dendrites, the branches. Then this is the long axon, and then this is the axon terminal, which is, you know, so whenever one neuron is signaling to this neuron, then what happens is if enough signal comes, then this fires an action potential, which is basically an electrical impulse that's spreading throughout the neuron. And then what happens is that in the process of the electrical charge, neurotransmitters, which are some chemicals, like some hormones, they get released. And they bind to other channels and other neurons as well, the neuron down here. So no, I'm not doing that quite as well. I should probably neural network. There are these two neurons here. This is the dendrites, this is the cell body, this is the axon, and then this neuron is signaling to this neuron. There's a gap between the two neurons that is known as the synapse. You're not going to quite see it as well, but there's a tiny gap between them known as a synapse. And then this is a neuron here. There's a gap between this neuron and this neuron. But so many neurons are interconnected. It actually looks like really convoluted like this, like a neuron signaling to another neuron, to another neuron, to another neuron. It's like a huge complicated web out there. And that's sort of what we are trying to do is, okay, this might be better. So think of it this way. This is the dendrites of this neuron. These are the dendrites of this neuron right here. This is the axon. This is the axon terminal, the ending part, you know. So all the signals, all the charges come inside the cell body of the neuron. This is one neuron, that's another neuron. And if enough of them come inside the neuron, that it reaches something called the axon hillock. It reaches the axon hillock. If it goes from negative 70 millivolts to negative 55 millivolts, if it crosses that threshold, it fires an action potential. That means that the signal spreads throughout the neuron till the end of the neuron. And when the signal spreads to the end, there are all these chemical changes that happen, but neurotransmitters and chemical molecules are released from here. Then they bind to these dendrites here on this other neuron. When they bind to it, electrical charges come inside this neuron. And if this neuron reaches that threshold, like if its charges change, if more positive charges come inside this neuron, then it will also reach the action potential and then fire to another neuron. So this neuron is not just firing to this neuron, it can also be firing to up to 10,000 other neurons. So it gets very complicated. And people just quickly show that when they're showing like in the withdrawal effect. So this is one neuron. This is another neuron. It's a baby neuron. This is another neuron. Neurons can be in all sizes as well, which is crazy. Some can be a few feet long, which I thought was really fascinating as well. I had a friend who had gone for some dancing, had this really bad foot accident, and always had sustained nerve pain. One of the nerves was neurons was just misbehaving and would keep sending her chronic signals of pain, which is very sad. But in general, so what I'm showing you right now is how neurons communicate. So if this is a candle here, so if I have my hand and it's on, why do I jerk my hand away from it? So what happens is we have one neuron here. This is a neuron, these are the dendrites, and this is a sensory neuron. And it's right above this candle here. So if it's detecting the heat, and when it's detected, it's sending that message that, oh my gosh, it's too hot. It's sending it across. This neuron is sending this message across. And this is in the spinal cord of the person. It's sending that message to the brain or the spinal cord, whichever one is closer. Remember that the brain and then the spinal cord kind of goes down along our back. So it's sending that message to our spinal cord. And then a neuron here, which is called an interneuron. So this is a sensory neuron here. This purple is called a sensory neuron. This is an interneuron in our spinal cord that's taking this message and saying, oh, okay, so something was hot. Okay, I'm going to figure out what to do, and I'm going to send it to a motor neuron. A motor neuron, what do you think the motor neuron will do? The sensory is feeling the heat, and it's telling that to the interneuron, and the interneuron is then telling something to the motor neuron. So what do you think it's going to tell the motor neuron to do? Like, what is a motor neuron connected to?
Is it like a muscle?
So what do you think it'll tell it's going to be controlling the muscle. So what do you think it's going to tell?
Is it gonna like move?
Yes, exactly. And it's going to tell it to like move the hand away. So do you see that? Like what it's going to tell is it's going. So this one is detecting the heat, and it's sending a message. Oh my gosh, this is getting too hot. Like you can't keep your hand near that fire for too long, right? Instinct, you can try and try and try, but then you're going to like, oh my God, I don't want to get burned, right? It gets too hot for you to handle. And then it's going to send a message here to this neuron here. And then this neuron is going to tell this neuron in our spinal cord or our brain, whichever one is closer, because it's like it can't always go to the brain all the way up here. It might be faster for it to go to the spinal cord somewhere along there. And then the spinal cord, the neuron that's living here was going to tell this neuron here who's controlling this muscle to please move. It's like, it's too hot, it's too hot. It's sending this message in this neuron like, okay, I'm going to get this muscle to move. So that signal was spread. So if I put my hand, so 3 neurons are involved. And if I put my hand above this candle and it's on and having my hand move, so neurons are communicating here. The same thing is true for this jerk reflex, right? Like if I step hamstring muscles to the brain with withdrawal reflex. See, like if you step on hamstring, okay, that's one. They're also for stretching. Okay, this is another one. I hope you guys don't mind this example, because it's a kind of a painful example to think about. And this is sort of, again, showing you what happens. So these are neurons. So the three main types, the sensory neurons, the motor neurons, and then there's interneurons. Interneurons are usually in between in the brain or spinal cord, and they're helping send the message. So if you're stepping on a nail, if you're stepping on something sharp, what tells your leg to move up? How does your flexor muscle contract or relax? This one is relaxed here. This left leg is not standing on any nail, but this one is being lifted. Why? Because you're sending a stimulus of pain into this, this foot. This foot is standing on this nail here, and it's receiving pain signals. And this sensory neuron is feeling this in the environment, and it's sending a message up to the spinal cord in the back. And it's telling it. And then there's another message that these interneurons, these pink are these interneurons. So one neuron, sensory neuron here, wherever you see a gap, that's like another neuron. So another neuron is sending the message, another neuron here. They're sending the messages to each other. And then ultimately that message in the spinal cord is being sent back to these motor neurons in the legs. And this, so it's going all the way up to the spinal cord. Then the spinal cord is telling this leg. So the sensory neuron is going up to the interneuron in the spinal cord. That neuron is telling a motor neuron in the leg to lift itself up. So that all happens so quickly. So that's so in essence, this message is being sent back here, but they've shown it in this image. It's being sent back to this motor neuron. Motor is like a movement, like a motorcycle helps you move. Motor is movement, muscles. It's sending a message here to our thigh so that it lifts our leg up. Does that make sense? Like how these neurons are communicating with each other? One neuron's feeling the feeling, sending it to another part. That part is interneuron in the brain and spinal cord. Those neurons are then finding the appropriate motor neuron to move. It's like a messenger. Do you see that? It's all like networks of neurons communicating with each other. Do you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. See, an inhibited withdrawal reflex. So you have a neuron in the brain here as well. Neuron and brain, axon of neuron and brain, spinal cord. See, this is the neuron, this is the axon, and then this is the axon terminal. So motor neuron here. Okay, so if you're holding something that's very hot, guys, and this is why what I want to show you guys is just because it's very hard for you to just grasp sometimes how these neurons are thinking and waking and controlling things. But this is the basics of how we are sensing things, feeling things, doing things. What makes us the way we are, it's a bunch of neurons that are signaling and helping us interact with our environment. And in artificial intelligence, this is sort of what we're trying to master, the ability of these neurons to signal to each other. So if I'm holding something that is really hot, I'm holding on to this dish here. Axon of sensory neuron. What am I feeling? So this is the axon. This is the neuron that is feeling pain. This is the dendrite here. The dendrites, again, these are the branches of the neuron. They're taking in inputs from the environment. It goes from the dendrite to the cell body, the axon terminal. This is the axon. The axon is like, think of an axe. An axe, what does it do? What do you use an axe for? An axe. What do you use an axe for? AXE, I think.
What do you use to like break stuff?
Or chop down?
Yeah.
Chop down trees, right? So you chop down, great job, so you use it to chop down trees. So trees have this like long trunk. So axon, if you forget it, you can think of axon, like the axe is on, like trying to chop down this long branch here. So similarly here, this is a dendrite. It's receiving information pain. Oh my gosh, this is too hot. I've been through that. Like my mom could carry very hot things, touch wood. I can't. My neuron is very activated. It feels a lot of pain very instantly. It's not numbed to heat. So what happens is it picks up, I'm picking up this really hot bowl and I'm feeling this pain. This neuron is transmitting the feeling of pain across. So it wants to communicate to this muscle, but it just can't do it like that. What needs to happen is a sensory neuron that's feeling pain. Sensory is senses of pain. It needs to send this message across. This is the whole axon, and this is the axon terminal. This gap between this neuron and this neuron is called the synapse. This has branches. This one looks a lot more like this. You know, neurons can have different shapes as well, but this dendrite of this neuron is taking the message from this neuron. And if it is enough, then it's going to fire. And this is axon from neuron in the brain as well. But what happens is that this interneuron is in our spinal cord. So our spinal cord is like this in our back, right? So our spinal cord, see our brain and our spinal cord here. So what they're showing here is they're just showing, imagine you just, your spinal cord, so this is your brain, this is my spinal cord, like on the back. They're just showing what happens if you slice. This is just a slice of the spinal cord. What they're just showing is just like a slice of it. Like if you slice from here and you're just looking from top down. So this neuron is sending the message to this interneuron here. It excites the motor neuron. Excites means it's helping send that stimulus, that signal across from one neuron to the next. It then communicates to the motor neuron, causing muscular contraction. So this neuron sends a message to this neuron in the spinal cord, which then connects to this motor neuron that's also lodged in the spinal cord, that then goes back to this muscle here. So this interneuron is kind of like a messenger sending the message from this neuron to this neuron here. And then what happens is it tells the arms to move when you're carrying it. This interneuron, this interneuron excites the motor neuron, causing muscular contraction. But then there's this other neuron that prevents the muscle from moving. So there's one neuron that tries to get you to move. There's another one that tries to prevent you from moving. So there are multiple neurons out there. It's like if you've ever wanted to cry and you try to hold it back, or if you've tried to hold back a sneeze, some things will help promote the sneeze, other things will calm it down. Like if you're feeling emotional about something, one person can make you even more emotional while the other person will calm you down. So basically, from this signal to this signal, this is all from how neurons communicate. And that's what I wanted to show you here, guys, is that there are neurons and then they're communicating with each other to send the signals that are allowing us to think, to feel, to reason, to act on things. It's all about how we go from one thing to the next thing. And we react to our environment. We react to pain, we react to anything, any emotion, any sensory emotion, we are reacting to it. Reacting to fear. Well, how does our body like shut down when we're in fear? Does that make sense to you guys? Like the neurons are responsible for how we react, from our muscular movements to our thoughts, to our processes. And even for controlling facial movements too, if you're happy, like if you've seen something and you're happy to see somebody, you know, like how does your mind act? So all of these things that give us intelligence, the ability to function, it's all about neurons communicating. And scientists were thinking that if we want to come up with artificial intelligence, to come up with things that are, you know, intelligent, like robots, machines, but then why not figure out how our brain is actually working and build some mathematical model that is very similar to that?